It's on. Yeah. Someone whistle for me. I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting today. We are going to go ahead and get started because we have several speakers to speak today. We have our candidates for criminal sessions judge today. We have David Calfee, Clay Collins, and Rebel Johnson. And we are going to give them 15 minutes each to speak. So they're going to be starting here in just a minute. I do want to go ahead and welcome our elected officials. If you are an elected official and you would like to introduce yourself quickly, we're going to go ahead and do that today. So we'll start on this side with Gayla.
Gayla Miller, Circuit Criminal Court Clerk.
I'm Donna Simpson, Clerk.
Charlie Coggles, Cleveland City School Board at Large.
Chancellor Gerald Bryant, Chancellor, 10th Judicial District.
I'm Mike Jennings, Circuit Court Judge, 10th Judicial District.
Okay.
Cindy Slater, County Commissioner, District 5.
Michael Slade, County Commission, District 3.
John Ball, Chairman of the Commission, District 3.
David Rainbird, County Commission, District 7.
Barrett Painter, I'm your Sessions Juvenile Court Judge, Bradley County.
Sandra Knight, Bradley County Road Superintendent.
Steve Lawson, Sheriff, Elwood County.
Anyone else? Okay. Also, if you are a candidate in the upcoming election, you would like to introduce yourself quickly, we will do that as well.
Josh Rogers, County Commission, 7th District.
Shelby, County Commission, 2nd District, CV.
My name is Paul Rush, and I'm running for criminal court judge in the 10th Judicial District.
Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm Josh Taylor, running for County School Board, 4th District.
I'm Rex Wagner, and I intend to be a candidate for State Representative, District 24.
I'm Johnny Wallace, and I'm a candidate for County Mayor.
Leon Shahan, candidate for District Public Defender, Bradley, Polk, and Monroe County.
Anyone else? Oh, Mr. Raker.
One more time, I'm Kevin Raker, and I'm running for State Representative, District 24.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. We're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance, and Miss Pat Snyder is going to lead us in that. If you'd stand, I think the flag's in the corner, maybe. No, it's here.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and Cindy Slater is going to lead us in our prayer today.
Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the privilege that we have to live in the great state of Tennessee and Bradley County. Father, I pray that you be with each and every person in this room, Lord, as we go day to day, that you would help us live our lives for you and only for you. I pray, Father, that you would help us to remember that, Lord, your mercies are new every day. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you. When you came in, if you are at a table, you should see some announcements. I did that today so we can maximize our candidates' time and not take up time to listen to me speak. So if you've got these, just kind of pay attention. There's some upcoming dates and information on there for you to keep. And without further ado, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, I'm sorry.
Your mic is not on. We can't hear you.
I don't know. It's on, but it's not working. I don't know how to turn it up. I have no idea. I don't know. Work on that also. Try it now. Can you hear me now? Nope. Still can't hear. Can you hear me now? It's very... You guys may have to speak very loudly.
I don't think that's the problem.
I know. All right, is that better? No. Still not better. Oh, that's not better. Okay, well, you guys are gonna have to be loud, so, we're gonna start with David Calfee. We're giving them 15 minutes, and then you're gonna hear a timer go off, and they're done. So, we're gonna start with Mr. Calfee.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try to project my voice since we're having issues with the amplification system, and I've been told that there's never a problem hearing me, so if there is today, it'll be the first time ever. My name's David Calfee. I'm running for General Sessions Judge Part 2. We call that criminal sessions because in practice, what has been happening over a number of years is all the adult criminal cases that are filed in Bradley County are heard by this particular judge, and Judge Jenny has signaled me that I'm too quiet for the back of the room. I am 44 years old. I live here in Cleveland. I'm married to Camille McGill Jenkins, and have been for the last almost 7 years that she's put up with me. She is a Bradley County native and works for Miss Gayla Miller in our criminal court clerk's office. Have a 16, almost 17-year-old stepson who's a junior at Cleveland High School, as hard as that is to believe at this point in time. Grew up just up the road in Rome County, native East Tennessean. Grew up on a cattle farm, so learned about hard work at a very young age. Trying again. I want to keep talking while he's doing that.
I stopped the timer.
It's okay. I attended a small country church there in Rome County. I think that's better. Everybody can hear me now. So those traditional Southern rural values, conservative values, are how I was raised, and that has served as the cornerstone or core for my life since then. I have been practicing law from day one right here in Bradley County. January 22nd, 2007 was actually the first day I ever worked as a lawyer, and it was here at Child Support Services of Tennessee. Spent not quite 10 months working there as the state attorney doing enforcement of child support, modification of child support, and establishment of child support for them. We had conservatively several thousand cases through the divisions of our courts during that time period. So learned a lot very quickly about handling a high volume of cases. In November of 2007, I was offered an opportunity to go to work for Bill Brown on the corner of Inman and Ocoee Street, and I've been there ever since. Every week, if not every day, I practice in Bradley County courts. I have practiced in every division of our General Sessions Court, both the civil, juvenile criminal, and the criminal sessions court. I've also been honored to be asked by our General Sessions judges and the General Sessions judges in Polk County to sit in as what we call a special judge, meaning if they cannot be here or have a conflict on the case, I've been asked to sit in and do their job for them. I've been very honored to do that. For the last 11 years, I have served as the municipal court judge for the city of Benton. Again, over that time, conservatively, several thousand cases have come through our court, both in terms of civil ordinance violations and a lot of traffic cases. As you can imagine, there's a lot of speeding in Benton. And they are very happy to write tickets about that. I'm running for this position, quite frankly, and most simply because I want to do the work. I want to serve you as Bradley County citizens, and I want to try to make our court system as efficient as it can possibly be. One thing that kind of gets overlooked in this election cycle is that ideally, our two General Sessions judges are supposed to form two halves of a partnership, meaning anything one can do, the other can do. So Judge Painter sitting here today hearing civil and juvenile cases. Our current judge in the criminal position, Judge Randolph, can do exactly the same thing. For many years, we've kind of gotten away from that being a partnership, but if I'm chosen for this position, day one, whoever the other judge is, I want to sit down with and come up with a plan how we can make the civil and criminal sessions work better as a whole. That is what you as Bradley County citizens are paying us for in these positions. When one judge has conflict, the other one should be filling in and taking up that slack rather than sending cases to Polk County, McMinn County, Hamilton County, and elsewhere to be heard by some of our other county judges. Looking specifically at General Sessions criminal, there are several things that I think the public probably doesn't know. One, when we talk about a high volume of cases, there's an astounding number of cases that comes through General Sessions criminal court on any given year. In 2019, which was our last year before the pandemic started, we had over 7,600 criminal cases filed in that court and another 4,600 traffic cases, 12,000 cases plus. When you have that volume of cases coming through a court, you have issues that are somewhat unavoidable. Things fall through the cracks. You have issues with notification of victims. You have people who are showing up several times before their cases are ever heard. And as a result of that, compounded by the last couple of years when we've been under pandemic restrictions, we have a backlog of cases that has to be fixed. The easiest way to do that is to find these cases that are over a year old for no good reason. It's not that we're waiting on someone to complete a drug rehabilitation program. It's not that we are waiting on lab reports, toxicology reports that are outside of the court's control. The cases that are old need to be set for hearing or resolution by agreement. That is what our criminal sessions court is supposed to do, process these things quickly and fairly. It takes a team and a lot of coordination and cooperation to do that. From the law enforcement officers who are on the streets, corrections personnel with the sheriff's department, court security, our clerk's office, the district attorney's office, and our public defender and private bar. Everyone has to be pulling towards the same goal, and what that should be is a fair and impartial resolution to cases. Judges are not prosecutors. Judges are not defense attorneys. They are the fair and impartial deciders of fact and appliers of the law. Not the law that we wish exists, but the law that the legislature has given us. We do not legislate from the bench. We apply the law as written. One of the things that I think that we hear a lot is complaints about people being released on bond very early, people being picked up on repeated cases and turned right back out. So what's the answer to that? Well, simple answer would be to lock them all up. However, Sheriff Lawson knows we only have so many beds in the jail. It also costs on average, and I'll ask the sheriff to correct me, but $74 a day is what it costs to house an inmate here in Bradley County. And you think about that number multiplied by several hundred people, that is what you are paying each day as taxpayers to house people in our jail. So we have other options. We have pretrial monitoring through ankle bracelets. We have pretrial bond issues. And for the people who are bond violators, they are entitled to a hearing on a bond revocation. And if they have violated their bond, they can be put in jail and either the bond raised or requirements heightened and more restrictions put on them. That is fair. It is impartial. It is an application of the law as it exists today. When people come into General Sessions Court, probably 80% of them are nonviolent offenders. They're not dangerous to the community. They are nonviolent offenders, and a huge percentage of those people have drug problems. One of the things that you have seen from our legislature and from Governor Lee as of late is an emphasis on alternative sentencing. And we have programs here in Bradley County working both informally with nonprofit organizations working with the Sheriff's Department, who has a 100-bed workhouse facility for people who are employed and can serve time, help defray part of the cost of their incarceration, keep their jobs, and not have the ripple effects that incarceration can cause. And I'll ask the sheriff again to correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we have 10 or 12 people in the workhouse out of a 100-bed facility. We should be encouraging that as an alternative sentence. That helps everyone. I'm running again because I want to do this job. I want to serve you as Bradley County citizens. I don't have an agenda other than to do this job and do it well. I think that my combination of experience as a lawyer, my experience as a judge, and my background, both educationally and personally, makes me the ideal candidate for this job. Again, I'd like to thank the Republican women for having us here today and allowing us to speak. And I will remind everyone what Ms. Gayla Miller usually says: this organization meets when it's not election year. So be sure to show them your support, because they are a good group, they are active and involved, and they need to be supported. I ask for your vote, I ask for your support and consideration of our Republican primary on May 3rd. Thank you.
My name is Clay Collins, and I'm also obviously running for criminal sessions court judge here in Bradley County. I'm going to get it out in the open real early on. I always start this way. I'm always up front. Sadly, unlike David, I was not born in Tennessee. I did not grow up in East Tennessee. I hate to admit it, but I actually grew up in California. So I know you got to get out there early. But in Los Angeles, in the belly of the beast, I grew up in a very not a typical California home, and of course, obviously, when I grew up, California was actually red at a time. We forget that now, but changed significantly over the years. But my father was a firefighter. His father was a firefighter. My other grandpa was a police officer. So I grew up in a very conservative Christian home, public service home. I was homeschooled growing up. My mom sacrificed a lot to stay home and homeschool me and my sister. And then for college, I went to the Master's College, which is a conservative college in California, a Christian college. John MacArthur was the president at that time. He is a pastor out there. Took a lot of heat during COVID because he refused to basically shut down the church for a whole year and refused to quit worshiping indoors. So that's kind of my upbringing. I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh, grew up working on conservative campaigns, which unfortunately in LA is a lot of losing campaigns. So whatever happens in this, I'm ready for it. But that was my upbringing. I got out of college and decided I would do what my father did, what my grandpa did, and be a firefighter. Got hired with LA City right off the bat, and about 2 weeks before my start date with LA City, actually injured my back playing basketball, pretty much broke my back. And then for 2 years, I was kind of in limbo trying to figure out what I was going to do. I worked on ambulances, I worked as a 911 dispatcher, but eventually my body didn't recover to the point where I could be a firefighter. And looking back, that was a blessing, and God used that to shape me and to show me where to go and to lead me to law school. That was when the economy was terrible, so my parents said, you just got to go get a job. If you can't do the ambulance job because you can't lift people anymore, go get a job. So I went out and knocked on doors of all the different businesses all over where I lived and got hired by a law firm, got in through there and said, well, I kind of like this. This is pretty interesting. This is unique. And I always liked politics, so I said, you know what, it's 2008, the economy's terrible, let's go to law school. I took the LSAT, and then I went to UCLA for law school, so completely different from my upbringing. That would be the typical, what you think of when you go to California. I like to say at law school I was 0 for 5. I was white, Christian, male, conservative, and straight. So it was an interesting 3-year experience. But also a good experience, because when you are conservative in an environment like that, it really makes you be a true conservative and shapes your views. During law school, I had the opportunity to work with the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a Christian conservative group, and got to go to Washington, D.C. with them and do pro-life work on their life team, and basically defend pro-life legislation throughout the country. I also went back to D.C. another time in law school and that time worked with the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee trying to get the fetal pain abortion law passed, which would have outlawed abortion at 20 weeks, which is when an unborn child can feel pain. Fortunately, we didn't get that passed. It would have been a huge shot at Roe v. Wade. I also, during law school, worked with, as you can see, my law school, I tried to get out of LA as much as I could. I worked with San Antonio at the district attorney's office in their child crimes unit and helped prepare child rapes, sexual batteries, things like that for trial with them. Law school was a busy time. I also met my beautiful wife, Carly, who's here today. Got married to her, became a father 2 times over. We have 5 kids, so it's pretty common for us to be coming out kids pretty quick. And at that point, once I got married, once I became a father, I knew I didn't want to put down my roots in California. I wanted to go to a place that shared my values and raise my children in that place. So I called up the Alliance Defending Freedom and just said, look, I want to get out of California. My wife's from Texas, so she's willing to get out. And we were looking at Tennessee. I had family in Nashville, but we didn't want to go to Nashville because we wanted to go to a smaller setting. And the Alliance Defending Freedom had an attorney in Chattanooga with a small firm. And what he did was basically he got paid by cities and counties and worked with city councils and county commissions to regulate adult businesses. Very random, very niche job, but basically if a strip club was being operated as a prostitution ring, cities would hire us to fight it. And so for 2 years, I worked in that law, did a lot of defense work because a lot of times strip clubs would sue the cities and counties when they tried to get regulated. So I did a lot of defense work, did a lot of First Amendment work because unbeknownst to some people, stripping, the Supreme Court says that's speech. So very strange job I had for 2 years at law school, really enjoyed it. Very cerebral, a lot of brief writing, a lot of arguments. But my personality type is I like to be up in front. I like to be arguing motions. I like to be in court. And with a small firm like that, my boss was pretty much the face of the firm. I was kind of behind the scenes. And so my wife, Carly, told me 6 years ago, she said, you know, this is a good job, but it's not really your personality type. You've worked with the DA's office before. Why don't you go in and try to get a job? So I said, I'll do that. So I printed up my resume, went in unannounced to Steve Crump's office here in Bradley County, here in Cleveland, and told the receptionist I just want to give my resume to General Crump, ask for a job, and I'll be out of here. General Crump was not there. I sat there for about a half hour before they kicked me out. And I called my wife going home and said, I'm never getting a job here. I've ruined it. But thankfully, they did take my resume. Steve Crump called me the next day, hired me the next week, said he liked my gumption. So I was a prosecutor here in Bradley County for the last 6 years. And in that position, I did pretty much solely criminal law. I argued hundreds of motions in 4 different counties, Polk County, McMinn County, Monroe County, and here in Bradley County. I was in all of our criminal sessions courts, all of our juvenile sessions courts in those 4 counties. As well as going before Judge Sharp in Civil Circuit Court, arguing 2 different public nuisance actions, as well as trying probably about 50 cases over those years and obtaining convictions, trial convictions, and everything from DUIs up to first-degree murders. I really love that job. I love getting justice and working in that way, in that field. And I thought that would be the path I would go. Career prosecutor, it's a great job. But in the role that I had, I got to see how all the other counties are and how our county here in Bradley is run. And I thought we really needed to make some significant changes in Bradley Sessions Court. And like I said, that came from being in Polk County Sessions Court and McMinn County Sessions Court and Monroe County Sessions Court. And when I talk to voters and people in this room who are engaged and active in the community, most people don't really know what's going on in criminal court because they make it a habit of not going to criminal court. And I don't see too many people I recognize from my job as a prosecutor in here, which is a good thing. But if you happen to be a victim of a crime or accused of a crime, right now the average case in Bradley takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years to get to trial. And that's not just COVID delay. That's been going back a long time. And the reason for that is a lot of times cases sit in Sessions Court, our lower court. It's not the trial court. And they'll sit there, as David was talking about, there's cases sitting there for years or more. And that's pretty routine to see cases continued and delayed. And as a prosecutor, that was one of the most frustrating parts of my job, was prosecuting people 4 years after a crime, 3 years after a crime. It was having victims come to court over and over and over again, and just a lot of them saying, look, I'm losing more time and money in this court system than I lost on the front end, and that's wrong. We shouldn't have a justice system like that. And so my big reason to run is we need to fix that. We need to clean that up. We need a judge who recognizes that's a huge problem. It's not just a little problem. It's not just the way business is. We can't have delayed justice. And I'm running to have a system where we will have every case heard within 3 months or less. If it's going to trial court, it needs to get on its way up to trial court. If it's going to be resolved, it needs to be resolved. Because right now this delayed system, it isn't doing anyone any good. You know, and what we're also seeing is when you do delay justice, you know, David talked a lot about bonds and things like that, and I agree with that. You know, you can't have a line for every single person. This is what happens. You have to have, you know, apply the law. But what we're seeing is our crime rate here in Bradley has actually gone up. And I think that's directly attributable to the fact that it takes so long to get cases to trial. And the law enforcement's doing a great job. They're out there catching people. You look at the burglary closing rates and things like that from the sheriff's office, that's gone up. But yet our crime rate goes up because it takes 3 or 4 years to get someone to trial. And a lot of these folks will get out on bond after bond after bond. And it's not that uncommon to see the same person have 3, 4, 5 felonies before they get to trial. And we need to fix that. And we need to do that by having speedy trials. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a speedy trial, and that right goes for accused, that right goes for victims, that right goes for witnesses. You know, I've tried DUIs here that are almost 4 years old, and imagine having a police officer come into court and try to remember back what happened 4 years ago. I have 5 kids, so I can't remember back really what happened last week a lot of the time, and you're asking. So this is a big system change that we need to make. This is stuff that can be accomplished very simply by having a hardline rule, by having a judge that says, look, when that case is on the docket, it gets heard. We can't just keep kicking the can, whether that's coming from prosecutors or defense attorneys. People need to be ready in court. What we're also seeing a lot of the time in courts is that, and there's other simple things we can do. Another one of my big plans is that cases a lot of times will get set at 9 o'clock. That's our docket right now. Every single case gets set at 9 o'clock. Well, not every case gets heard at 9 o'clock. A lot of times court goes to 5, 6, 7 at night, and people sit there from 9 o'clock all the way through. And I don't think that's right either. So my big thing, and I've talked with the clerks about doing this, and this is very feasible, it's done in other counties as well, is we have a morning docket. You get there at 9, you're gonna be heard before lunch. We have an afternoon docket. You get there after lunch, you'll be heard before dinner. These are things, simple things we can do to implement. There's also ways to say, look, if there's a difficult case, if there's a murder case, some kind of prelim that's complicated, we don't set that on the same Tuesday, Thursday with every other case. We have a special setting for that so that it doesn't take that 3 hours out of everyone else's day to handle a case. And we also have victim dockets. You know, we need to have, and that's another thing, set victim cases for one time, and because sadly a lot of our crime is drug related, set drug cases where it's an officer and a defendant, set those for different times than victims so victims aren't waiting through all of that. These are simple things that we can implement day one. I've talked with the clerks about doing that. That can be done. And those are some of my ideas to do that. You know, another big problem, and David hit on it as well, you know, in fighting crime for the last 6 years, I've seen that most of the crime in this county, most of the crime in Tennessee, probably the country, probably 80 to 90% of it comes from drug use. It's just a sad reality of where we're at right now. You know, I'm a Christian. I think that the only change for that is a heart condition and change, but I would like to try to get some help for lower level offenders. Right now, the sad thing, the reality is that we have drug programs for felons. So if you commit a felony, you can get into Judge Freiberg's crime drug court, which is a great court and does great work. But if you commit just a misdemeanor, there is no help for you. It's jail time or it's, you know, probation. There's no funding for that. So one of my plans, and it's on my website, is basically we need to try to get a federal grant to do a drug court for low-level offenders. I'm not a big fan as a conservative of the federal government. I think they're printing money like crazy, and as 5 kids, my inflation is killing me. But they hand out grants all the time for programs like that for low-level offenders, and we should try to get that. We should try to help. It was so frustrating for me as a prosecutor to have families where they have a kid maybe 18 years old say, look, my son just got hooked on fentanyl. I don't know what to do, and to have to say to them, the only thing I can really do is send him to jail because there is no funding out there to send him to rehab. So I think we need to look at that seriously. We need to start being more proactive with how we're doing and handling drugs in this community. So those are all the reasons I'm running for judge. I would definitely be honored to have your support and your vote. I would be happy to talk with each of you. I'll be here. I'll stay as long as it takes if you have any questions about what I'm hoping to accomplish or what I stand for. But I would definitely ask for your vote and also for your prayers as well. Campaigning with 5 children has not been, doing anything with 5 kids really is not that easy, but especially campaigning. So I appreciate you letting me speak here today and for this event and for the Republican women who host this and do really such a great job putting these things together. So I appreciate y'all listening to me, and I'll go ahead and pass the mic. Thank you.
I'm shorter, but I still need this mic a little higher. My name is Rebel Johnson, and I'll start off by answering 2 questions that I get asked most often, and that really is my name, Rebel Johnson. I checked the birth certificate. My parents have a little bit of a sense of humor that carried over into my name. The other question I get most often asked lately has been, is the gray hair real? And it is, because my otherwise youthful appearance kind of throws people off. I'm a longtime Bradley County resident. I've lived in Cleveland, Bradley County for over 50 years. My earliest memories of Cleveland started, I guess, at Mayfield Elementary School. I was convinced as a kid that that's where the Mayfield Company started its distributions, because when you're in the cafeteria in the basement, you had all these half-pint milk cartons, right? And I was convinced that they were somehow connected to each other. I went to Arnold Junior High for 2 years and then started at Cleveland High School. Was there for about half a year, and then my dad took a job in of all places, Minot, North Dakota. I'd shake my head every time I think of that. So Minot, he was a dean of students for a Bible college at that time. But we quickly got back to Cleveland in 1977, and I've been in Cleveland ever since. In 1977 is when I went over to Cleveland State Community College, and I took a few classes for 2 years and had the privilege of meeting Ann McCoyne. Ann McCoyne was a teacher at Cleveland State, and I said this publicly many years ago, so I'll do it again today, but she told me, I wish she was here, but she told me, you know, Rebel, you can be an attorney, you can keep your integrity, you don't have to turn out like Bill Brown or Van Deeken. It's just, and I've told Bill and Van both of that in public before. Ann McCoyne denies all of it, and it's true. I went to Cleveland State, and then I went to UT Chattanooga for 2 years and majored as a criminal justice. I will tell you a story that no one here, but maybe my wife knows, but when I was going to UT Chattanooga, I interned at the Cleveland Police Department for 6 weeks, and which is mainly riding with police officers here in Cleveland. And those were fun times. But the thing that might surprise you, surprises me, is my supervisor, and locals will know who this person is, was none other than a man by the name of Larry Ogle. You're supposed to go, ooh, because a few years later I prosecuted Larry Ogle for murdering his wife and his son. Some of the locals will remember that case. That one was one I had. After UTC, I went to I went to law school at University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and after 3 years came back here. I met my wife Lori. She's originally from Adulton, and she was smart. I didn't see it at the time, but she waited until I actually passed the bar before she would say yes. So, and that was coming up on 36 years ago. So happy with that. My first landlord that I ever had was Richard Banks, who's here today. I rented a spot that Richard had, which is right next door to Diamond Lil's restaurant downtown. And I would practice for about a year when Bill Brown came over one day and said they had a vacancy at the DA's office and asked me if I'd submit an application, and I did. And I worked at the DA's office 11, 12 years under Jerry Estes back in those days. I was a prosecutor for those 12 years, and those were all full-time. Prosecuted a lot of cases. I didn't count my jury trials, but it had to be around 100 or plus. I don't know how many. But it tried the aggravated kidnappings and rapes. And sometimes when you think of General Sessions Court, you don't really think of these major cases, but basically nearly all of them begin there in some manner, and nearly all of them have to have prelims in the General Sessions Court system. So after being at the DA's office, there was an opportunity that I had to work in the federal system. The term was cross-designation. Jerry Estes asked me if I would be cross-designated to federally prosecute cases in Chattanooga for a little while. Although I was still full-time in Cleveland, I did that, prosecuted some gambling cases, which I don't think would go over too well today, but money laundering, did some carjacking cases and so forth over in district court. Those were fun. And that's why, and you may see if you've looked up resumes, that they refer to those as special assistant U.S. attorneys. So I did that for several years. After being in the DA's office, I went back into private practice, and that's, again, the name Richard Banks comes up because I met with Richard, and for the last 20 plus years, I've been with Richard Banks here in Cleveland. Richard's law firm is obviously known as a bankruptcy law firm because that's the bulk of what we do, but for the last 20 plus years, we've always done other kinds of criminal defense work. I've done contract work. I've done a lot of domestic relations work. And I think as a General Sessions judge, I think any judge who's in that particular slot needs to have as much a wide variety of legal experience as possible. There are areas of law that don't just stay under the criminal aspect. There's domestic relations, obviously, often plays a role in criminal court, as does a lot of others. Richard and I have even been involved in a few medical malpractice cases. I don't see any of my doctor friends today, but I checked. They're not too thrilled to hear about that. But conservatorships and wills and estates and, again, a lot of domestic relations cases. I think those are important to know. And getting back to something that David Calfee said earlier, I think is very important. So the Sessions jobs, I think, should have a well-rounded judge of a lot of different areas of law. But I do want to, and I do agree with him on the statute involved. It's actually 16-15-209, and it basically says the two Sessions judges are to fill in effect for themselves, and it's the first priority. So when Judge Painter has a conflict of interest, I should fill in for Judge Painter. That's the first option, and then there's second and third and fourth options. But I do think that needs to be followed, and that's something that I look forward to. If Judge Painter is there here in a couple of months, that's what I intend to do, is meet with him and also describe the times and schedules that we have that we can cover for each other when we have conflicts of interest in particular. I believe that the judge should also have, the more public service that you've had and had experience, I think the better. For me, some of my public experience involves teaching some courses at Lee University. I've taught, one of my favorite ones was controversial legal issues of the day. Can you think of a few? I sure did. I served as a board of trustees for Sky Ridge Medical Center, but two of the ones that are the most dear to me is a place that many of you don't know of. It's called Lifton Redemption. Many years ago, I was approached by Pastor Gary Sears, and he asked me if I would consider being chairman of Lifton Redemption. He said, right now it's not really doing anything. We want to see that organization get going again. So he asked actually me and my wife Lori if we would do that, and we said yes. The first thing we did on the board of directors was to kick off all the pastors. They're just too busy, and they wanted to be kicked off. So we kicked them off and got other people on the board. The only one that remained was Kelvin Page, and that's because he wanted to introduce us to Reba Terry, who was a member of his church. And it was Reba Terry who came in with one precondition to being hired as the director of the Caring Place, and that was changing the name to the Caring Place. So I was on the board and the chairman for many years of that organization that is still a very important part of what we have in Cleveland, Braddock County. The other one is New Hope Pregnancy Care Center. It's very dear to me. I'm a person that most people in town know of me in some manner. I'm not surprised when I say I'm a pro-life, but so what have you done about it? And that's when the term integrity comes up. It's one thing to espouse a view, but it's a whole another thing to do something about it. And so that's when I got involved with New Hope. My involvement with New Hope Pregnancy Care Center goes back to when Kathy Irvin was the director, and then Kay Horner was the director. And then I'm proud to say, well, while I was chairman, my sister, Donna Higgins, became the director of the Caring Place. So that organization is very dear to me. We don't think of these organizations as crime prevention units, but they are when you really think it through. And what brings me to this position, because I've had a few of my old friends who have been a little curious about my running, because I know the magnitude of the job. When I was in private practice, when Judge Bennett was the judge before Judge Randolph, he had a lot of health issues, and so for many years I sat in for him at the Barely Sessions level, and learned a lot of things doing that. But what brings me back is I've seen too many people, too many law enforcement officers that are just spent, and I've seen too many prosecutors and public defenders, and I think it's time. Please let it be the time that we think of the criminal justice system just a little bit differently. Can we do anything to prevent? Is everything in law enforcement and in the criminal justice system reactionary? Is that all we ever do, is react, react, react? And I do think that in addition to, I'm all for applying for grants, that's a good thing, but I do think there are a lot of organizations that are already out there that we could do a better job about communication between these organizations. And I do think law enforcement holds a key role in getting involved in preventing crimes from occurring in the first place. So for example, one that's already been going on for years that I love these officers at the schools. They're there for security, we all get it, but it creates a relationship between the kids and law enforcement and the law enforcement and the kids. It's a big deal. One of the struggles with it is that statistically it's hard to be able to show how that affects crime rates and so forth, but I'm telling you it's important, especially in today when we have a national dialogue where it's this dialogue that really upsets me, and it's us versus them. I hate that. It's us versus us. It's not us versus the law enforcement or law enforcement versus us. We're all part of the same thing here. And I want to be able to, when on the bench, there's a lot of work to do. There's no question about it. But I think I'm up for the task of it. The next thing is when I'm off the bench, what I want to do is to promote, advocate, and push for these other avenues of getting to people before they always, do we have to wait till someone gets killed or someone gets seriously hurt or someone gets seriously mentally damaged before we do anything? Well, I do think there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I've talked briefly with Sheriff Lawson about it. He was telling me about a CDL, which is a commercial driver's license, where the county is involved, get this, in actually helping to train individuals to get a license so they can get a job. I'm telling you, law enforcement would be much more mentally healthy if they could have a few stories about what they did prior to something bad happening. I would love to have Sessions Court on Thursday nights be a place where you can come and get your GED education at the Justice Center. How about that? There's things that I have in mind, and my time, Lori?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. That I really, my commitments, I wanted to talk about efficiency as possible in the Justice Center. I'll give you a couple, these aren't new ideas. But a couple of ideas I have on the efficiency aspect of the Justice Center that's been mentioned this afternoon is this. Look, I do a lot of bankruptcy work. I'm used to 8 time slots every day. So for example, tomorrow I've got court, and we have court at 9. I have a docket at 10, a docket at 11, a docket at 1, a docket at 2. You get the idea? And there's a way to do that at the Justice Center, and it's not that complicated. What you got to do is set cases, so many cases per hour, so that when an individual comes, they have a much better chance of getting a case heard within a reasonable period of time. And you have to cap it, so many cases per hour, so that a person doesn't come at 9 o'clock, as was mentioned earlier, and then they wait around till 1, 2, 3. I tell you what, you sit around in a courtroom for 2 or 3 hours. We had over at the old Justice Center, we had a snake literally fall out of the ceiling one time on somebody waiting in the courtroom. That's a true story. We have 1 minute left, and so let me go to the last thing I want to talk about, and that is drug rehabilitation, mental health counseling. I think mental health counseling, again, I'm not trying to create legislation. Wouldn't be my job as a judge. But I do think we can do things mental health wise. Look, I don't know the percentages. Maybe Steve Lawson might help me on this. But a lot of what law enforcement does sometimes is get people off the street for their own protection. And there's a mental illness catastrophe that is all around us, that I do think we can do some things with working through churches, nonprofits, other secular organizations, that we can address some things. And you know what? There isn't a model out there. I can't give you an example of how this is done perfectly, a good example to follow. So why can't we do something as a group, as a justice system, together? And I think we can. I think there's a lot of good people in this system. I know there is. And I think we can make a difference. I appreciate your time. I too ask for your support, your prayers, and your vote coming up not too long. May the 3rd, or better yet, earlier. But anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, so that concludes our meeting today. You're welcome to hang around and visit with the candidates if you want to do that, and we will see you guys next month. Thank you.